Hello everyone, and welcome to the first of what I'm sure will be many Varlamore streams. Very excited to finally be able to say the words Varlamore to players, I'm not going to lie, after lots of secrets were kept before the Summer Summit this year, so it feels good to finally be able to say these words. So yeah, I am joined by the one and only Mod Other. How are you doing today?
Hello. Yeah, I'm not too bad, to be honest. Coming off the back of a long stint of design work for all this Varlamore stuff, so, you know, what better time to talk about it?
Exactly. So yeah, if you couldn't figure it out already, we're going to be discussing the first blog that we've released about our planned Varlamore content, or at least the first part of Varlamore, the Hunter Guild. It's a fresh look at how we can make Hunter a fun and engaging skill to use. In case you missed it, drop an > Hunter in the chat to get a link both to the original blog and the freshly dropped feedback blog that we released about, I feel it was over an hour ago now, but around then. So yeah, check that out if you want to have a read while you're listening to us chat everything about the Hunter Guild. And before we jump into the Q&A, we have a few announcements to go through. So first up, ! Game Hunter. Game Hunter? I'm really in the Hunter mindset right now, yeah. ! Game Update. The Path of Gluffery is live. This week game update brings the newest quest for the gnome storyline and more. Alright, ! Trailer is next, and we've partnered with our dear friend Hootie to create this amazing trailer for the Path of Gluffery. So check it out with that command. It is a fantastic trailer. Hootie always delivers, smashed it out of the park like normal. And next, ! Deadman. The end is nigh. Deadman Apocalypse comes to its epic conclusion live on Twitch this Saturday, so you don't want to miss out. Full details are in the blog we put out today, I believe, so you can check out all the information there. And finally, if you couldn't guess it, ! Hunter. Check out our original blog and the updated feedback blog for full details on the Hunter Guild and what we'll be discussing today. Alright, just before we jump into the Q&A, there's a few game update fixes that have been added to today's script that I should talk about. So, first off, next week, shooting stars will no longer deplete faster if other players are mining them. For solo scouted stars, we would like to add a small extra incentive to reward players, but this needs to be polled first. We're currently looking at a 50% buff to Stardust for 5 minutes if you're the first to mine a star, and we'll confirm hopefully by next week's news post. Next, the new Poison Waste Spirit Tree will be moved to the end of the list by next week. In the future, we'd love to add the ability to customize Spirit Tree locations, but that's a much larger job. Also, to disincentivize griefing in the Guardians of the Rift minigame, we will be stopping players getting mining XP after you've mined a certain amount of times in one game. All of these changes can be found in the game update news post by using ! Game Update. Alright, with that being said, we should probably jump straight into the Q&A. I will say it's been really nice actually to see all the feedback about the new additions that we made to accessibility with the news post. It was something I've wanted to do for a long time, and I thought, let's just do it. Varlamore's a good place as any to start, so hopefully we can continue it, and you guys enjoy them. So it probably won't be for every single news post we release, but at least the big ones for Varlamore, I'm planning to do them all. So yeah, we'll see what happens. So let's dive into the questions. Mod Other first, how are you feeling about the release of the blogs and the Hunter Guild as a whole at the moment?
Yeah, pretty good. I mean, it's one of those things where it's like we're never going to be able to sort everything with a skill like Hunter in one go. And we've had so much feedback to work through over the last 3 days. But it's been good. There's so much positivity for a lot of the changes we're looking to make. And I think it's a really good sort of first step forwards towards making Hunter a skill that belongs in 2023's version of old school RuneScape. And I won't be distracted talking about the fact that some of that script was written, I'm sure it hasn't been touched since Hunter released originally, It keeps me up at night. So yeah, there's some work going into modernizing the sort of back end side of Hunter at the same time, which I think sets us up as well, looking to the future. You know, if we have something that's a little easier to work with, we can sort of make a lot more adaptive changes and do a lot more things on the fly. And yeah, it's all very exciting, really, from sort of a content that's going out and sort of from working on it script side.
Awesome stuff. Awesome stuff. I think Varlamore in itself has got a lot of interesting places it's going to visit, especially in part 1. So, and you'll definitely see a lot more about that soon. But for now, let's start with the very first question. Why did you decide to remove the Hunter's Bolas? And we've put this as the first question because we know we've seen a lot of feedback from the feedback blog. So we thought we might as well address this first.
Yeah, I think there's an element of working out like what the players are comfortable with that's gone into it. I'm trying to put forward the idea of a hybrid weapon and finding a slot to pitch something that is going to be thematic to Varlamore. So a lot of my ideas are like, we're going to this new place, we're seeing a lot of new people. They're going to be doing new things, because if they're doing the same old stuff, like, do you really want to walk around and explore and get to know them and see what they're up to? Because you're not going to get anything new. And then that's sort of tempered with a hit of like, well, we don't want to introduce like peak PVM equipment from Hunter necessarily on its own. So Bolas were my initial thought for something thematic. Yes, there is history there. You know, that's kind of the big kind of weight on the idea. But they would have fit, you know, the things that we're looking to be hunting. I thought it would be a cool weapon that really does fit that hybrid, like, you're throwing it, you need to be accurate with your range, but you need to be physically strong to really pack that punch. And I toyed between bolas, spears. The idea of like a weapon that's on a string would be kind of cool as well. And I believe things like that may be explored elsewhere in Varlamore. We've certainly had some good discussions internally about that kind of weapon and like what we can look to do with it. But yeah, we opted to swap off of bolas sort of almost back to the original spear concept. Just because like there's probably too much history, and even though a lot of us on the team were comfortable with the fact that actually they were very, very different, you know, we had taken into account a lot of the original concerns of bolas when we looked at sort of spec cost and like sort of the sort of power level it's going to sit at and how you have to get them. But really, it wasn't gelling. You know, the feedback was mostly that it just wasn't quite gelling. So, you know, we revert to the original design, and that's okay. You know, that's. I think we're still going to get something really interesting in this sort of hunter's equipment kind of thing. And I think we lay some interesting foundations here that, you know, I've got designs that we can then build on. Hopefully, you know, we got game jams coming up, so a really good opportunity to explore that.
Yeah, very true. They did fit very thematically with Hunter as a skill. And for those I saw a couple questions in chat actually about the history of bolas. It's not the history of bolas as a weapon in IRL purposes, but bolas were, I believe, introduced previously, and there was contention about how they were used previously, which again Modother has said that we looked at when we were designing them. But on that note then, Modother, how will the Hunter's Spear be useful without the bolas special?
You know, this is maybe a controversial take. I don't think it has to be useful. It doesn't have to drop with this obvious, like, I'm going to get the Hunter Spear and do this exact content. There's this element, it's a very restrictive thought, I think, that everything that we design has to have some immediate place where it is the best item you can use for it. Because what happens is we keep then reverting to we revert to type. We think about, can we do something new with combat? Okay, well, here's an idea for a thrown weapon that scales off of your melee strength. Do we have a couple of places where actually, yeah, you might be swapping between ranged and melee, and this serves as almost like an entryway into gear swapping? Yeah, I think we have room to say this probably works as a really good entry into content where you're gear swapping and you can only, you're thinking about so many things, and maybe it just cuts it down a bit. Maybe you don't have to swap your armor anymore because you've got a weapon that's going to hit through some creature's melee prayer. But I really want to sort of dispel the notion that absolutely everything has to come in and it has to be useful. Because I think we just end up in this situation where we abandon creative ideas and potential in favor of saying, well, players would want this to only be useful, when, it's not a massive investment of the dev time on this project to have a go with something like this. So that's where we're at. We're having a go.
Yeah. And we thought, it's still there and it still works with the mixed hide set, which is what the mixed hide set is based, is why we put it in there, because it emphasizes that idea of a ranged weapon that can use melee strength, which is an interesting angle to explore and definitely offers or allows us to open up the reward space a little bit more by using this as I suppose, kind of testing ground, but it's definitely something that could fill some gaps or niches. Be interesting to see if they pass, how you guys would use them. So yeah, definitely interesting. Okay, next on the questions are rumours one and done tracks, or are they more akin to Slayer tasks where you would have to hunt a certain amount of creatures?
So I actually played around with both ideas. The one we're going with, you hunt and then you will, at some point you will get the drop. It's a little bit RNG. The attempt will obviously be to balance it so it doesn't feel too bad, and you're not necessarily going to go there, hunt 2 creatures and leave, because what we're looking for is really, I'm trying to get people out hunting in the world, and just I want to see people at different hunter locations. And I thought about a numbered based system. But it didn't sit with the thematics of Varlamore, of the guild. I think there's, a lot of the design decisions I think will make more sense when we have this full picture of Varlamore from future blogs on, the other content we're introducing and, the stuff we get through the quests and things like that. So yeah, it's not specifically numbers based. I didn't want people sort of fishing for things where the numbers are optimal. I really wanted to have a design that really dissuades people from trying to find it's only worth doing XYZ rumor because, this is going to maximize your sort of time to rewards. Because also that ends up feeling less rewarding for people doing certain skilling methods. If you want to tick manipulate box traps to speed up times where you're using them, if it turns out that there's actually an optimal meta where you never do that, then you've got this skill and you haven't really got room to use it and express it. And yeah, it's kind of finding that balance, basically.
Yeah, I think that's well put, Modave. Yeah, so it's definitely different. It's based on that same sort of premise, but I feel like Hunter Rumors needed that difference rather than just being a copy paste of Slayer task,
Yeah.
Right, awesome, thank you. For those who didn't read the blog, actually, we did estimate that it would take about 8 to 10 minutes. Obviously, RNG dependent. Sometimes you might get spoon-fed a rare creature part. Sometimes you might have to go a little bit more just to get that. But that's the sort of the average we're looking at the moment. Cool. All right. For the next question, for what content do you see the Hunter's Sunlight Crossbow being used? I had to really force myself not to say Moonlight Crossbow then.
Yeah, I think it's an interesting one. A quicker crossbow is, it offers something slightly different. Mostly perhaps this is my own frustration with regular crossbow speeds, where you're about to attack, you're one tick short, and then you click to move because there's like a mechanic you need to dodge, or there's just you just click to move because you want to move. I do that quite a lot. I think it has a use as a sort of alternative where you don't want to lose those ticks because you're moving a tick too early or you're doing something a tick too early. And I think going forwards, like, it opens up a lot of doors, having almost like an alternate progression path through crossbows. So you have your metal crossbows where you've got your enchanted bolts and you have that progression. And what I want to encourage is this development of a progression path that's like Hunter's crossbow, Sunlight Hunter's crossbow, a range of bolts from like higher and higher level creatures that do interesting things. Because I think it's a real shame that we don't have like this sort of depth of things you can do with hunters. Like, hunter creatures could offer us so many different things. Like, imagine bolts like giving you a way, like another way to poison creatures, using some poisonous creature to make hunter's bolts. That was one that, ended up cut from the design. The idea of applying a bleed as well, I think is really cool. Like, you could get like jagged bolts made out of bones that would then bleed your target. And I think it offers us this alternative to, like, here's a bolt proc that completely bypasses your opponent's defense. Like, we can almost do like status effects with hunter bolts where they wouldn't really fit as much with the enchanted bolt kind of system.
Yeah, I think there's definitely room to explore new avenues for bolts, specifically with the Hunter's Sunlight crossbow being used, which is definitely a cool avenue to go down, I think. All right, the next question is, how much of the feedback changes were due to PvP feedback? And I want to jump in quickly before Modova answers this, because these changes that we've made, we don't just look at one area for feedback, even if they do contribute to making a change. So none of these changes was just because of PvP feedback or just because of use against other players. There's multiple angles on it. So just please bear that in mind, even though it might seem like that's not the case.
Yeah, so in terms of like how many of the feedback changes we've made were due to like PvP feedback, I think the easiest way to put it is we had a lot of these considerations in the design phase, or at least, I did, because it's mostly my design. And there's obviously a lot of information that like we can't blog, because putting a dissertation length design in front of people, no one's going to read that shit. Well, they might listen to it, though. To be fair, they might listen to it. So it's really like what we've done is we've gone away. We've looked at a huge amount of aggregated feedback from the surveys, from Reddit, from Twitter, from like everywhere that we got feedback. And we sat down and we said, okay, are we introducing something that is going to be unhealthy for certain areas in a way that we can avoid content side? So like for a lot of the changes, like they're true to the design, but we've given them like a little vitamin shot so they're healthier, and I think it's really important that we do that. We do need to keep in mind that like some people will just use new things to rag with, and perhaps that's not going to work when we've done a lot of really good things for PvP updates. Then to turn around and be like, here's a whole bunch of cheap stuff for raggers, we end up contradicting our own design philosophies by not making these changes. So yeah, I think some would have been due to PvP feedback and concerns, but we were in the design. Like, that stuff was in design already.
It's definitely something that maybe I should have been a bit clearer in the blog, like exactly what areas it was addressing, and use the word ragging, because that was the problem, or at least one of the problems we saw when we were discussing feedback. So maybe that's on my part to actually say, like, look, this is part of the reason why, and it's important because that they would have been, it seems like from all our discussions and the feedback we saw, an easy go-to, and not just an easy, a very easy go-to, which we wouldn't have wanted. So yeah, all right. The next question we have is, can we have a different use for Fennec Foxes than killing them? They're too cute to kill.
Oh gosh, a lot of them are too cute to kill, and this question speaks to quite I'd say a deep issue with Hunter as a whole, in that it's Slayer with traps rather than combat. But yeah, a lot of the things are pretty cute, and perhaps killing them is not the right approach. As it stands, we're not rebuilding Hunter from the ground up. We can discuss a potential replacement to Fennec Foxes. Maybe there's something that people would be more comfortable trapping with a giant rock falling on their head. But I think where we stand is that we sort of have these creatures. They look really great, and we want to make use of them. We don't want some fantastic models and animations and stuff just sort of sat in storage because there's no use for them. So yeah, that's kind of where we're at with Fennec Foxes. But they are cute. They are very cute.
They are cute, but this is Hunter. We're here to hunt things.
Exactly.
So, for me, doesn't matter how cute something is. If it's in the hunter skill, it's there to be hunted. So, and don't get me wrong, Fennec Foxes are cute AF. But if it's going to get me some XP and some goodies out of it, they're going down. So,
I mean, if we want cute things, we literally have chinchompas that we fucking throw and explode on people. So if the Fennec Foxes don't explode, I think we're really doing well compared to chinchompas.
They are literally, the essence of cute explosive creatures. So it's something that you should keep in mind when looking at the other creatures we're pitching. So, chinchompas are so adorable. So adorable. So maybe think about that. Maybe have a moral dilemma next time you're throwing a chinchompa at somebody or something. All right, think about what that little life means. All right, we'll move on to the next question before we delve down the rabbit hole of creature ethics. All right, the next question. The next question is, what would you think of allowing players to eat again during the hunter meat heal over time, forfeiting any remaining healing from that meat?
I feel like this was one of the big discussions that we've had internally following the feedback. Some people didn't like the element of being locked out from eating again, and found that would be too disruptive. Personally, I'm kind of 50-50. I think we introduce an interesting difference to that eating system where, you don't just want to take an inventory full of hunter meats. You want to have hunter meats to give you the extra hit points. And then you want to have things that you can eat in an emergency if you've already eaten something else. I think the idea of forfeiting the healing is the right balance to allow players not to be restricted. Because then you're still rewarded for, effectively you're rewarded for risking waiting for that heal by getting it. And, one of the tweaks we've made is bringing some of that healing, taking it out of the upfront and increasing the delayed heal, because that is where that is what the design is for. It's something that changes up how we eat and adds an element of decision making, an element of risk. I don't really know how people are going to use these. We've had some discussions internally, if it's reliable, then what about tick eating? Well, this could be a really creative way to tick eat, depending on the implementation. So I think allowing them to eat again, forfeit the heal, that's kind of fine. It forces you to make a choice, because I think that probably addresses a question we're going to have coming up later about like what happens to fish when we introduce things that heal more. I mean, you know, what happens to fish when players get the ability to stock up on Saradome and brews and super restores? It's kind of an element of like we need players making an active decision between the two. So like that is where the design has ended up.
Yeah, and this I think it's important to note as well, alongside the brew statement, that not every fish right now is there to constantly munch down and regain your health. You look at things like Karambwans and monkfish, for example, you wouldn't normally take like you wouldn't fill your inventory full of Karambwans, for example. They're there as like a utility to help with healing. So these could be seen as the same light as them. Maybe you don't want to bring a full inventory full of them. Maybe you want to just bring a couple that would give you that boost when you know you're not going to be damaged again for a little while. So yeah, I think it's about looking at alternatives rather than replacements to food, because there's so much we could do with food as a whole and healing mechanics. So it's just about making sure that there's alternative options, because it's a place we haven't really explored before, but it's probably worth exploring.
Yeah, and I think on that exploration front, I think that we have had a lot of internal discussions about, you know, is the sort of food economy something we want to look at tweaking and expanding on? It's something that's certainly prevalent to me. Like I spent some time looking at the Wintertodd damage formula, for example, and there's no better way to really realize like the weird situation we are actually in with food than just looking at like content that does constant damage to you. Like there's this massive gulf right now between like fish and then brews, and like we have anglers. Anglers are a really cool idea with the overheal, and I think we should also be looking at that, like the idea of more overheals perhaps, or like things that you can use. You can almost preemptively heal and then take the damage, and you still get value. I think that's where like you lose value of fish, is where you've lost 10 health. There's a boss mechanic that could hit you for like max health. You're going to waste half a shark getting up to full to avoid the mechanic. You know, what about something that's going to give you 10 health? You take the damage, then you get 10 more health. Well, who knows? Maybe that's got use.
Yeah, I will clarify, I meant anglerfish, not monkfish. I just always see monkfish in my mind from the early days of playing this game. Right, okay. The next question will stick on the hunter meats theme. And what other effects did you consider for hunter meats?
Oh, so I've considered like a wide variety of things we could do. Some positive, some actually negative as well. So a lot of it is like balancing that, like, do we want a secondary effect, and do we want it to be at the cost of health, like of some of the potential healing, and like how do we do that, and how do we give like relevant effects to the creatures? But I mean, you know, we've had quite a few discussions where it's like, could we have something like that is going to cure one tier of poison and, you know, potentially venom, and maybe even protect you from venom for like 5 or 10 seconds, and like look at the potential of like, what about if your food gave you like a 30-second stamina effect because you've got it from a creature that is really good at running around? We had some discussion about like potential combat stat boosts coming with the food. Like you eat like, I don't know, like a grok steak, and you get like +5 attack that doesn't decay, like almost like divine, weaker versions of divines, but on food, and they don't last as long or whatever. Like we considered like the whole spectrum. The only thing we didn't consider was like, eat this food and get +4 construction, because it doesn't make anywhere near as much sense. Yes, we're a fantasy game, etc., but I think there's an element of like keeping them combat relative was a lot of the focus with the potential effects, and we've had some really good feedback about them, and I hesitate to say that going forwards we'll love to expand upon them. I mean, I would love to expand upon them personally. And I think if we get more hunter creatures in like later in Varlamore, I think we might get some really interesting effects.
I will say two things. One, I saw a comment saying, sounds like we're trying to replace Herblore. I stated it in the blog, but these effects would never replace something like a stamina pot. Like, they would never give like the same big boost that stamina would. It would just be an extra utility on top of, you know, the healing properties. So I don't think these effects would ever replace Herblore in any sense.
Yeah, I think it's a misunderstanding, I think, about the value of the Herblore boosts. Like, anything that is not as good as them will not have the same value. I mean, obviously, like, that statement seems really, really simple, but, you know, getting +5 strength from eating food, you're still going to want to bring a super strength potion. Perhaps, yes, a stamina effect kind of changes that balance, but like, you get about, what, 8 minutes of stamina from having a full stamina potion in your inventory, and that's one slot. If you're getting, say, 20 seconds of stamina effect from your food, that's 24 inventory slots for the same stamina effect. And I think it's, as you say, it's about like the little things, the little interactions, rather than like the grander kind of, you know, you're still going to want all of your potions, basically, no matter what. Like, a lot of the design discussion was like, here's what the potion does, here's what the meat could do, and then here's what something else in the game already does, and finding that slot between sort of the worst option for doing something, bring it up a little bit, comparing it to the best option, and then sort of finding that middle ground. Basically.
Yeah. For what it's worth, the food doesn't give you a stamina effect. Because I saw someone in the comment, it just restores some run energy.
I was sort of talking about the potentials. Designed, it's just run energy.
Yeah, and like the other thing I was going to say is that we had an internal discussion as well, because there was which I didn't realize at the time when I was writing the blog up, is that there was discussions or references in the sailing blogs about like potentially exploring different ways that new fish could utilize healing and stuff like that. So it doesn't have to be just limited to hunter meats. If this is something that is good and you guys like, then it's something we can explore further with different things, but we don't want to just rush into it and pile on loads of effects. We need to make sure we're taking our time and making sure they're worthwhile and not replacing anything. So cool. All right, the next one is are we wary of invalidating fish by adding hunter meats, which we've sort of already discussed.
We've sort of already discussed, but I will say we were very aware, and you know, I think we've had a lot of opinions from people weighing in, like in terms of experience with the game, in terms of like the sort of level at which we play the game. You know, we've got some absolutely fantastic PVMers on the team and PvPers and things like that, and we made sure internally, like, we took in as much information from everyone that we could. Fish would still have their place. In fact, like, the hunter meats, like, we probably can't sit here and be like, well, you're going to want to use them here, here, and here. We want to leave things for players to work out and like let players set the value. Some players will sit, who knows? And yeah, I think fish will be fine. You know, if we sort of invalidate fish, then maybe we send them to therapy, but they'll get over it.
That's not what I envisioned coming with the sailing skill as a fish therapy centre. But who knows? Who knows with that skill? All right, the next one, we'll stick on hunter meats for one more question, and then we'll move into something else. And the question is, a lot of hunter meats aren't worth keeping or cooking because they're only mediocre foods. What would you think about allowing for skewed beast meats and other such cooking hunter meats to be used with leaves to craft foresters' rations?
So My first reaction to reading that question is effectively the same reaction I was given on my first design for Hunter's Meat. It's too much. I think you are going to have a better time with it if it is slightly lower healing. Maybe it can, don't get me wrong, I love the idea of skewers. I really wanted to go with that. But it really does get, I say it gets really sort of picky, You end up having to do so many steps when you could just fish for a shark or an anglerfish or a carambaran. And like the simplicity, I think, is key. As interacting with like forestry leaves, I considered that sort of interaction. Maybe like you can do like some herb interactions with the meats to give them that secondary effect. But again, you cross that line, I think, into if it's like a broader thing like we're looking at here, where like we've got 9 or 10 creatures giving you meats, it becomes too much. If we were looking at, I think if this were a cooking expansion and we were looking to do something really interesting with cooking, we could then take the hunter meats that we introduce and add a new way of cooking them. Maybe you can make a meat and fish skewer. Maybe you combine something with a carambaran on a skewer, and that you can use that to tick eat. Or not tick eat. Is it tick eating? Combo eat. That's the word. So yeah, I would say a lot of it was considered in the design. A lot of it felt like too much. Is really the answer there. And we like to keep it simpler. It's more approachable to players. It gives them more value for their time as well, and like respecting that time investment and finding the balance there.
Yeah, I agree. I think that process would be too convoluted for something we're trying to introduce. I want to introduce it in slow increments and then see where we can go from there. But right now, I feel like it's in a good place where you unlock Varlamore, you get the trust of the locals, and you unlock a new cooking method that gives you a different flavor of food, which is nice. All right, let's move away from hunter meats and talk about pets for a little bit. With the first question being, are you concerned about giving the hunter skill a third pet when some others only have one, if any?
Am I concerned? No. I have been tasked with doing a hunter guild. My concern for other skill pets right now is 0. Hunter having 3, yeah, well, why not? Hunter as a full skill, as like you hunt all the creatures and maybe get a pet. You don't actually have one. You have a chinchompa pet, and you have a herbivore pet. And I think that's where like there's sort of, I say, a disconnect between like the idea that Hunter has 3 pets. There are 3 pets. There would be 3 pets gated behind Hunter as a skill. But this one would actually require you to be using a broader spectrum of that skill, much like other skill pets do. And yeah, it's kind of a weird one to sort of talk about, I think, because like you look at some of the other skilling pets, like I've seen people think about like, how's the drop rate going to be like compared to like the Phoenix or something? It's like, the Phoenix isn't, it's like half a fire-making pet and it's half a Wintertod pet. And I think the true skilling pets this is more in line with, because you're doing different things. You're not just doing the one activity to get the pet. And this is obviously with the exception of people trying to speedrun getting all of the pets, who will probably be doing one strategy because it's the best drop rate, for their time. But yeah, no, I'm not really concerned.
Okay, thank you, Moldova. Okay, talking about pets, someone asked, can we get pets that we trap around the world we can keep and breed at the Hunters Guild?
Oh, that would be a really cool idea. And it's giving me ideas for like future game jams. I think that it would be cool to have systems where you can... I'm trying to think of the way to condense my thoughts. I like systems where you do things and the world itself around you changes, rather than like you do something and then you have something new on your character. So the idea that you can like capture creatures and have them show up in the guild, like it's kind of got like Monster Hunter vibes, where if you trap the creature, it shows up back at whichever base camp you're using. It really depends on the game as to whether it's a camp, a dock, or whatever. I like that idea. It's one that I have toyed with in the past for Hunter stuff, and I'm sure we'll have a look at it in the future. I think some of our zoos, I say some of our zoos, the Ardy Zoo could do with a really big like refresh. So maybe that's a concept we can use there, and just like be like, hey, we've actually put some new creatures in the Ardy Zoo because we've got new creatures from Varlamore, but you need to do a quest where you go out and capture them. You know, it can be lightweight, it can be fun, but it can follow that idea.
I'm seeing a lot of Pokemon Monster Hunter references in the chat as we speak. I did see someone ask when shiny pets. Would you imagine how destroyed the petting hunting community would be if we introduced something like that? Insane.
I mean, I guess we have the golden chinchomper at 1 in 10,000, but yeah, I guess the idea of a shiny pet, that the pet drop is shiny and not like it's made shiny through interaction of some kind. Oh, the collection log would never be finished at that rate.
Pet hunters would be going for years, I think. Years and years and years. So, yeah, I feel like that's a... I love shiny, don't get me wrong. Shinies are great in Pokemon. Old school pets, maybe not so much. All right, let's go on to the next question. Is there a way to make existing hunter outfits relevant with this update?
That's a bigger question than it looks. Yes, there is. We have some of the old script for things like the camo outfits. Contained within that is also things like a debuff for being within line of sight of the traps. Now, I do think that we can look to... We'll scrap that. We don't want to punish players for using camouflage, because that feels weird. But it's a very difficult design conversation to have. A lot of Hunter is a much bigger conversation than I think it looks. Like, having looked at pretty much every part of it lately. So I say the issue with camouflage right now is that we have 3 types of camouflage. You've got multiple armor pieces. I mean, you're looking at like, I think something like 20 or so different hunter armor pieces that we have at the moment. And that covers 3 environments. We're looking at Varlamore. You know, we're introducing a whole bunch of new sort of actual environments that we don't really have on this kind of scale in the rest of the world. And, you know, people are going to think, why is my polar hunting stuff useful when actually there's no snow here, but it's cold and rocky, but it's not snowing? You know, why is my sort of jungle stuff working somewhere that's not really a jungle, but it's kind of close? So we end up in this situation of like, we can bring camo back. I'm pretty certain we can bring camo back. But we need to have a very long discussion about how we handle environments with that, because personally, it's bloat to add a camo outfit for every separate environment, as cool as it is thematically. How many people are going to keep, you know, 30 armor pieces somewhere to go and hunt in like a different area at some point? So I do think there's actually quite a large design discussion to be had there, and it sounds really small, like camo yes or camo no. But we could do camo, but there are so many, it's like cascading considerations. And then you have to factor in that like increasing catch rate will increase experience rates, which means that we have to have a discussion about how we impact experience rates for Hunter. Because obviously if you're catching more, you're getting more XP from the successful traps. And obviously this fades away for a lot of creatures where you hit like 100% catch chance on sort of a script side. But again, and then that becomes an interesting one, because you get the question of like, why is someone a lower level getting more benefit out of this outfit than someone who's a higher level? Yeah, it feels so innocuous. Maybe that's the wrong one. It feels very innocent to ask the question, can we bring back camo outfits? And the answer is we can. And I think the question becomes, how do we, or how should we? And I think this is a discussion that like I'm angling to have with the team internally fairly soon. We are looking we're looking at potentially like making a lot of the really bad feeling hunter stuff, like make it feel a bit better with like a little kick of experience and things like that. So yeah, I think that's how we talk about making the existing outfits relevant.
Yeah, me and Modother were chatting, maybe it was yesterday or the day before, amongst all the Hunter Guild feedback about a game jam project where it could be, which I think I put forward, a giant chameleon that you have to escapes the Hunter Guild, and you have to run out and hunt it down in the different areas, and it blends in and adapts, and you have to use the camo to your advantage. But that, I will say, as cool as that may sound, that is like outside the scope of the project. Maybe a good game jam pitch for somewhere down the line, but yeah, not something that we're going to be able to do with the Hunter Guild right now. Just so expectations are met.
Yeah, game jam's a dangerous concept for Hunter. Yeah, the deeper you dig, the more you find, and it's not pretty. It is not pretty.
Yeah. When the idea got brought up, all the cogs in my head were turning so rapidly about like the different things it could do to mess you up, and like putting down slippery surfaces to trip you up, and even if you're hunting as a group, maybe swallowing one of them whole and you have to chase after it and break that player out. So yeah, we'll see. Maybe in this game jam, next game jam, who knows? Maybe we'll have some talks.
We'll find some time.
Yeah. All right, let's go on to the next one, which is, can we please craft the hunter outfits ourselves instead of paying to have someone else do it for us?
I'm working on it. It's not something that's come up in conversations, because to me it feels like such a given that I just don't talk about it very much. The intention is to make all anything that someone else can make for you with Hunter, you're going to have a way to make yourself. Because at this point, like, the things that the player is capable of making far, far exceed putting some hides together. So there's no reason not to really give players a way to make things for themselves. So that's kind of the intended. That is the design. That's like the starting point, is players are crafting for themselves here.
Yeah, thank you, Modother. I'll just answer the next one, just because it's a quick and easy one. Could the Hunter Cape have a teleport to the guild like several other skill capes do? Yes. We already talked about that. It's in the feedback section of the feedback blog. You'll need to just use a blueprint on the cape, and then you'll unlock that. That's the current premise. Right. Next question then is, can we get deposit boxes near some hunting areas at the cost of GP/hunting materials, or one-time payment for access to a deposit box?
It's one of those things that I've considered. It did come up, like, a big part of this whole design is like, can we start making these incremental quality of life changes to Hunter? I think what gets me with the idea is like, how? I think is the kind of question that I have about this idea is like, is there just going to be a deposit box by each hunting spot? Is that almost too much convenience? Because that kind of falls into the same vein as like, why don't we put a deposit box next to every mining patch? I mean, yes, a lot of them have very convenient ones. You know, Shiloh Village Gem Mine has one. The Mining Guild, if you need to bank all your iron. But I think it falls into that, like, we go away from like quality of life with something like that to it really does become this element of like undermining part of the skill, and part of the skill is that travel to a new area. It's that feeling like you're in the wilderness, because like some of the areas do feel like you're in the wilderness, and not the PvP wilderness, the wilderness like in the real world. I must clarify. I do not feel at risk in the polar hunter area like I do in the wildy. But yeah, I think it's sort of antithetical to the skill to introduce deposit boxes of some kind. We can look at systems for that later on, I think, if it really is such a problem.
I feel like we're already approaching that.
We're
though.
already making like steps with a meat pouch, with a fur pouch, and there's like, I think the difficulty is it's like everyone just drops that stuff now because it hasn't got any value, so it's not worth banking. And so I think it remains to be seen, like, if we end up in a position where like the hunter outputs are all so great that everyone wants to be banking them, I think then we take a step back and we say, okay, can we add some thematic and appropriate tweaks here so that's a less disruptive activity?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, I think, yeah, like Modother said, the pouches do that, I think, and they do that pretty well. So use the pouches. Use the pouches. That'll be great. Right, I'm going to move this up because I have realised in putting together the blog, I think I missed something that we discussed and feedback. So I'll go into this question, and then Moldova, you can answer it. Will the trap storage include butterfly jars? Butterfly jars are used for hunter, so it'd be weird to include impling jars and butterfly nets, but not butterfly jars.
I mean, yeah, we can pop butterfly jars into the trap storage, however we choose to do a trap storage. Hopefully, with a bit of barehanding, you might not need them. I think that like the current position for butterflies, like whether or not we buff them, I say buff, like tweak them as laid out in the blog, like they actually are really interesting, like additional XP while you hunt something else. A lot of them are around where you're hunting, like they're around the deadfall traps, they're around the pitfall traps. So like either having like the ability to get carry some butterfly jars with you so you can grab them as you go, or allowing you to not need them. Again, grab them as you go. You can engage yourself a bit more by, going and grabbing them. You get a bit more XP. Like, I think, encouraging people to hunt butterflies is anything we can do there, really.
Yeah. And on that note, the thing that we discussed but I didn't include is that we want to poll the idea of giving you an option to catch, I think it was implings, without the impling jar, if I'm right.
Oh, yes, yeah. What was it? You can catch an impling barehanded. You can catch an impling with a net and a jar. You can't catch an impling with a net and then with your bare hands hold on to it and get its loot. Yeah, so that's definitely one. Catch with a net and just... That's quality of life, somewhat skipping that release step. If you want to keep them, bring jars, easy peasy. If you have no interest in keeping them, you're just catching them.
Yeah, I feel like it's way more difficult catching them in a net and then trying to put them in a jar, and then, as Mod Goblin put it, negotiating with them afterwards. Whereas if you've got them in a net already, you're already at the negotiating stage. You don't need to include a jar. So yeah, we want to give you the option. This is not to say that we're removing the impling jar method, but we want to at least poll the option to allow you to do it without them. So yeah, All right, here we go. Let's talk eagles next. Could we use eagles to carry out small jobs for us? For example, you could send your eagle off to the bank with a pouch of things to deposit. We're talking about basically hunter servants. Is that what we're talking about?
It smells like taming to me. Last I heard, we didn't vote for that. Not my skill, but I think that would be an interesting one. I think that kind of ties into having deposit boxes in hunter areas. It would be kind of cool. It would also need like so many balancing ideas, and like it would be complicated just on the idea of like, okay, where do you have this eagle? Is it yours? Is it just around? If it's just around, why does it work for you? If it's yours, like, is it following you like a pet? Like, I think, yeah, it's just, that's a really cool idea. But there are like so many considerations as to like how that would actually work in practice, that perhaps teleporting to a bank and getting back to the hunter area is just a quicker option.
Yeah, honestly, I don't want this. I don't want this. It's a cool
Yeah.
concept, but you know, it feels bit too easy. And like Modother said, the amount of balancing you'd have to do around it is insane. So, okay, we're going to do 3 more questions, and then we'll wrap up the stream. First off, why would barehanded catching moths be useful, since we'd still need jars? It's not like the implings where you might randomly come across one without gear.
So, what's the best way to break this down? If you barehand them with a jar, I mean, yeah, fine, you've grabbed them without a jar. Maybe you're carrying like a crystal grail while you run around catching them for some entertainment. Or you've got a leagues trophy you want to flex while you hunt. If you were barehanding them without a jar, though, and like use them to like immediately buff yourself, that's got some really cool implications for content. Like, you imagine doing like some dungeon themed content where you can, if you have the right hunter level, you can catch these moths and get like a little hit of prayer or a little hit of a hit points, like a quick little heal as you run. Like some of the placements I'm looking at for these moths, like moths like light, they're kind of urban-y, so they're going to be kind of close to things you're doing. And like, why use like an extra shark to make sure you're at full health when you could actually just barehand grab a moth on your way through to the content, or like between content? Yeah, I think just like it has use to the individual with barehanding, and at least if you don't have jars on you.
Awesome. Thank you, Modother. On that note, do moth jars require accept aid to be on?
We've not actually discussed this. I would have to look at what would be consistent with the rest of the game. My guess is that it would end up being yes. But that's actually not... I'm trying to think if there's any way you could grief with them. I mean, I guess if someone's using Darox, you could somewhat troll them by healing them up against their will. Yeah, that's one I'd have to come back to. The likelihood is you would... yeah, I don't actually know what would be... Basically, I don't know what would be consistent. And I'd need to look into it.
Okay, well, you guys can let us know if you want accept aid on or off. It would be interesting. I suppose on that note, whatever, we should maybe quickly touch upon, would irons benefit from somebody else's moth/butterfly?
Oof. We're irons, we stand alone. That's about all I can say. There's not really there's not really like an easy way to be like iron. Well, okay, there's an easy way to be irons affect other irons, but I won't specifically use the integrity word because I don't think it's an integrity issue. but I don't think that there's like a huge gain to making this change where it's like, oh, actually irons are included in all of this, where a lot of the time they aren't by default. So it may come down to discussion, and like finding out what we think is best as a team.
Yeah, I think that's very fair. Okay, I might have lied. We're going to do another question after this one, but that is it. You're not going to see us for that much longer, but okay. So the first one is, can we get even more uses of furs? It's nice that the outfits will have some use now, and that the furs can also make pouches. These pouches let us hold more furs. I feel like we need something else on top for them. Why do I need to make a fur pouch? Why will I need tons of furs?
So it's a fair question. I think we can definitely add more uses for furs if like that becomes if that's a really dominant feedback point, like people really want us doing more with furs other than making a new armor set, potentially as a use for crafting your own camo. I mean, obviously, like you can take them to people to make camo, but we've gone over this. And making pouches. But like, I don't think everything necessarily needs like 101 uses. Like, what do you actually use a dragon hide for? You tan it, and then you turn it into, for the most part, armor that you either out or you sell. So really, what are you getting out of dragon hides? You're getting crafting XP and a bit of gold. And I think, honestly, we can, at least to start with, we can look to put furs in that same position. You're gathering them because they'll be worth, you know, X amount of gold in crafting XP. Or potentially just, you know, a decent amount of gold once you've crafted an out. And I think with the pouches as well, like having this sort of multi-tiered system, for me, I really like the idea that it gives value to the lower ones inherently. Like, you can sit at the Grand Exchange, buy all of the tier 2 pouches and all of the furs you need to craft them into tier 3. And that would be like really, you know, it would be great crafting XP depending on how we balance it. But what that also gives is it gives value to the people in the position where they can't craft the top tier pouch. They could craft the middle tier pouch. And then the same again happens for the people at the bottom. So you kind of lift everyone up with this sort of, with the way the furs are at the moment, which I think is really cool. You know, you're rewarded for taking the time to craft, even if you've got like 50 crafting. Then you'll get to 60 and whatever, you'll unlock the next tier and all that. Yeah, you will need tons of furs if you want crafting XP, is the current position. And maybe you want to make a whole bunch of armor and just go like risk to learn content with armor that you don't care about getting back.
Cool, awesome. Thank you, Moldova. All right, last question then, which I think Moldova asked if we were covering. What would you think of adding a hunting style boss encounter?
Oh yeah, I mean, you know, we've talked about hunting style boss encounters already. I mean, literally in my interview for this role, I brought up a hunting style boss encounter. It is something that I have so many ideas for, and I really am just like waiting for the right time, you know? That's what I think of it. I think that if I was given the go-ahead, then I could produce just like that. I've got a design. And I think it would be really healthy for the skill, actually. I think what Hunter lacks really is a challenge curve, and it's a gathering skill. Not every gathering skill needs like a challenge curve, but like Hunter sits in this weird spot where it's like you could fuse it with ideas of combat and give it this really satisfying reward for having a higher level. And that is something I want to look at. Like, we have a gathering skill that doesn't have a production skill paired with it, and we could turn it from a gathering skill into like a really cool like hybridized skill that kind of sits like in its own category. But yeah, just boss encounters, fantastic. They offer us so much leeway as well for making things that appeal to so many different people. And I really hope that going forwards, you know, I can find the time to do that. Whether that's like across game jams, things like that, like I'm fairly committed to at least getting designs in front of the team. Yeah, that's why I wanted that one. Like it's actually that's very personal to me. It's the idea of a hunting boss encounter. Yeah, very committed.
I mean, yeah, if we get a chance to work on the chameleon idea we put across earlier, then I am all for it.
Oh yeah.
Hell yeah. All right. With that, let's go through the announcements and then we will wrap up and say goodbye. So, exclamation mark, game update. The Path of Gluffery is now live. This week's game update brings the newest quests for the Gnome storyline and more. So, check that out with that command. And along with that, we partnered with our dear friend Hootie to create this amazing trailer for the quest. So, check it out with exclamation mark trailer. It absolutely slaps. Hootie always knocks it out of the park. Exclamation mark Dead Man. The end is nigh. Dead Man Apocalypse comes to its epic conclusion. Live on Twitch this Saturday. Do not miss out. Tune in and enjoy the carnage because it's going to be great. So you can check out all the details in the blog we released today through that. And finally, to wrap up everything we've talked about today, exclamation mark Hunter to check out the original blog and the updated feedback blog with all of today's feedback changes that are included in there. And just to note, check out the game update news post if you want to access the information about the game update fixes that were put in, that I read out at the start, which includes information about shooting stars, the poison waste spirit tree being moved, and decentralizing griefing in Guardians of the Rift. Yeah, well, I will say thank you all so much for tuning in. It's been a pleasure finally getting to talk about Varlamore for the first time. You will see plenty Varlamore coming soon.
No!
I have Mod Spear putting his head in his hands next to me, which is making me feel very, very happy. So with that said, Mod Other, any other words before we part from the stream?
Well, I just want to say thank you to everyone that's given us feedback that's usable. We shan't publicize some of the incredibly funny but useless feedback we got. Except shout out to the one person who responded to the survey saying something like, "Don't do this, I don't like Hunter." Congratulations, sir, on not liking Hunter. Hopefully this makes you like Hunter. And yeah, I know we didn't get around to discussing birdhouses, but over my dead body will I discuss birdhouses.
Okay, thank you very much, Modother. I think people have had hopefully they've had a good time. They've had a good time and learned some new things, and we've answered some questions. So, yeah, with that being said, I hope you all have a wonderful evening, morning, night, wherever you are, and you enjoy your weekend, whatever it's full of. So, until then, we shall see you soon, and have a lovely day. Goodbye.